My name is Christy Hoskinson. It's such a pleasure to be with you today. We're going to talk about things related to resilience and well-being. What you're seeing now is the first part of a three-part series that I'm going to bring to you, these on-demand videos that you can access at any time. And today we're actually going to focus on the topic of resiliency, and even deeper than that, how do we adapt? How do we adapt in this time of stress, challenge, and adversity? But before I get into that, I'd just like to share a little bit about myself. I work for FCCI Insurance Group. We are based here out of Sarasota, Florida. We are a property and casualty insurance company. It's such an honor to be able to work for this company because they encourage us to go out and volunteer. And even during this time, I'm coming to you during the peak of the COVID season right now, we're encouraged as teammates, that's what we like to call each other at FCCI, we're encouraged to give back to the community. And that's exactly what I have an opportunity to do with you today. My background is wellness and well-being. I currently serve at FCCI Insurance in the capacity of customer experience. But on my personal development, it's always been seeking to understand and to help people in this space of wellness and well-being. Thank you to the Gulf Coast Community Foundation for everything you guys are doing too, to provide resources, drawing from talent right here in our local community to help the region cope through this difficult time. Let's go ahead and get started. So here's the question of the day. What's the variable that makes some people thrive during transition and change? Right? There's just no change in that they absolutely stay constant. They maintain flexibility even during tough times, and they're able still to perform at a really optimal level, even amid difficulties. It's their degree of resiliency. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today, and specifically understanding that resilience it's not a secret gift that people have been given. It's really a muscle that we need to develop that really comes down to our ability to regulate our emotions. There's a lot to resiliency, and we're going to focus today on a very specific technique and tool, if you will. I call it a tool in my toolkit that helps me regulate my emotions. Let's just step back for a minute and look at the definition of resiliency. You're going to notice on this screen from time to time this logo pop up, and this is HeartMatt. I have had the honor of being a student of HeartMatt. The HeartMatt Institute has been around for a few decades now, and I've been really privileged to work with the team from a trainer perspective. And I've worked on a program called Transferring Stress, as well as the Resilience Advantage. And so there's a lot of things you're going to hear today that are rooted in the HeartMatt teachings that I personally use. As I said, I'm coming to you today from personal experience. I'm not endorsing or supporting necessarily any organization when it comes to what to do. This is just personal to me, and I'm excited to share with you today what's helpful. So as we look at the definition of resilience, I love this definition. It's the capacity to prepare for, recover from, and adapt in the face of stress, adversity, and challenge. And I've said this a few times already. We're going to focus on that one word, adapting. I think it's so poignant right now as we're all in this very strange season of what is going on. Depending when you're watching this, you may be cooped up in your home and have been for a few weeks now, working from home, trying to parent and be an employee at the same time, or maybe even trying to figure out what your next job's going to be. That's really tough. Two things you're going to take away here in the next few minutes. I hope in the next few minutes you've gained an understanding of how emotions drive our physiology and how they really impact our performance. And the second takeaway is a really simple, easy to use technique that helps us adapt in the face of stress. I have a small pet peeve with the following expression, and perhaps you do as well. When people say to you as you're maybe walking around stressed or appearing stressed, and they just look at you and they say, just calm down. Yeah. Those words, calm down, Yeah, because I've got a switch in me, right? That, oh yeah, oh, how could I forget? Oh yeah, see, everything's good right now, right? It doesn't work like that. Emotions are powerful. And I think it would be helpful for all of us to help one another with good intention when we say those words, but also equip those that we're saying it to with some tools and techniques to help us get back to that place of calm. I hope to do that for you today. All right, let's get into emotions and physiology. As I said, I'm a student of HeartMatt, and I love how they provide examples. What you're seeing in front of you now is, hopefully it looks familiar to you in terms of heart rate. On the vertical axis, you have beats per minute. On the horizontal axis, you have a timeline of 60 minutes. So there was a gentleman that was a patient of the HeartMatt Institute, as recommended by his cardiac surgeon. And they asked this patient, this gentleman, to wear a Holter monitor for a few days. And they were going to track his beats per minute, his heart rate. And they also asked him over these few days if he could just do his darndest to track everything that happened as best he could over these 1 hour intervals. And so what you're seeing now is a gentleman wearing a Holter monitor. If you look at the first 10 minutes, his resting heart rate is very normal, between 60 and 80 beats per minute. Very healthy, very normal. And then you can see that obviously he was having a conversation with his wife, and she said something that got under his skin. And what happened to his heart rate? Oh my gosh, right? It went way up. Really take a look at that. And he's in the 140s range, close to it. I mean, that's just about like a workout, like on the elliptical machine, or maybe a casual walk. That's really high, simply because his wife said something that got under his skin, and then they entered into an argument. That's a pretty healthy argument too, because it lasted for about 20 minutes. And then you can see the argument does end. He noted that in his diary. But take a look at his heart rate. It never really comes back down to baseline. And so what I want you to remember from this slide is that emotions drive our physiology. And what's interesting about this is that he and his wife were sitting in a metal box. They were in the car driving. And he was having this physiological response to the stress that was going on in that conversation. And if you're wondering what happened, is they got lost, and she suggested that they stop and ask for directions. Classic husband-wife story, right? But please remember that emotions drive physiology, and that's happening to us all day long, right? We may get a text from somebody that is a bit upsetting, or we may have a verbal conversation with someone that just kind of sets us off. We may open up an email immediately following this video and just, right, have a reaction. All day long, our emotions are driving our physiology. And that's important to understand from an energy management perspective, because if we have these peaks and valleys all day long, it's probably why sometimes at 2 o'clock in the day, you're like, oh, I am drained. What's going on? This has been a difficult day. Emotions are driving our physiology. And here's another one I want to share with you without getting too technical, without getting too much into the science of what happens as it relates to heart rate variability. I want to show you this graph because it's memorable. HeartMatt focuses on heart rhythms, which is measuring heart rate variability. Believe it or not, every time we have a heartbeat, there's a change in terms of the time, just down to the milliseconds. But there's actually a gap of time in between heartbeats. And there's variability in between those heartbeats. And when you plot out the time elapsed, it actually plots out into what we call heart rhythms. And so you can see if on the left-hand side of the screen, this particular patient that was working at HeartMatt was experiencing emotions around frustration. And these are the heart rhythms that showed up. HeartMatt even uses the term incoherent heart rhythms. It's a very jagged pattern. It almost looks like an earthquake. The parasympathetic branch and the sympathetic branch are just kind of going at it. It's like foot on the pedal and foot on the brake, not like a herky-jerky kind of thing. Completely different heart rhythms. When we're over into that place of appreciation, we'll call those renewing emotions. It's a very coherent, it's a very smooth pattern. The heart beats very differently, and the variability is much smoother in terms of the distance between each heartbeat. So I want you just to take this in just for a moment and say, well, gosh, am I over here on the left-hand side a lot, experiencing those depleting emotions? We often use the overall bucket like stressful emotions. Am I over here in what we would call renewing emotions, a place of appreciation, of gratitude, of peace? And that plays on your heart very, very differently. Remembering emotions drive physiology. I said I wasn't going to get too scientific, but I love this part of understanding how our emotions drive our physiology. There's a completely different biochemical release too, depending on what type of emotional reaction we're having. Very different biochemistry. If we're having a frustration or maybe a depressed emotional response versus one that's of gratitude, appreciation, and of joy and love and kindness. So if you're wondering, gosh, I'm over there on the left-hand side of the screen, my friends at HeartMatt have come up with a very simple checklist, and this list could be much, much longer, of course. But just let's check in right now and ask ourselves, are we experiencing any of these responses, right? Inability to focus, or maybe just feeling really challenged around that. Maybe even sleep patterns and being able to sleep is a challenge. Just being able to relax. I feel like you're losing that ability. Self-esteem, maybe feeling a bit more fatigued, a little bit edgier. Just having a hard time motivating yourself. You know what you want to do, but you're having a hard time kind of getting yourself there to be inspired and motivated. So all warning signs that that stress element is really starting to creep into our lives. What I want to go into now is the solution part. So if we recognize we're stressed, maybe a lot, maybe a bit, or somewhere in between, what are some solutions out there? There are many. Let's land on a few right now. I call this term choice points, right? It's the power in the pause. And I don't even know if I coined this term. Probably someone said it before me and I just kind of anchored onto it. But if you think about it, we have these moments in time, these points, these important intersections where we have a choice. We have a choice in terms of how we choose to respond, how we choose to ultimately react. And I say that with caution because we are emotional creatures. If you're human, you experience emotions. And I want to say right at the outset that it's really good to experience all emotions. There's no bad emotion. In fact, I'm of the camp and the belief, experience your emotions, allow them to happen. It's what you do with them that where you have then that power and that choice. So let's get a little bit into what I mean by choice points. It is what I just said, it's that pause. It's that ability in that moment, whether you're emailing back, you're texting back, you're communicating back, you're thinking about your strategy. It's that ability to just say, hold on, just pause for a minute and recognize what's going on here. I want to make the right choice in my response. Why is that important? It's important because it puts you in this zone that keeps you adaptable and flexible. So often in communications especially, we get anchored in and we get really firm biases in our thinking and we lock in to how we feel it should be done or how it needs to be said. And creating that moment where you pause and just sit back and sort of stay flexible and adaptable here is really powerful and typically bodes well for most of us. And so how can we do this? I said we're going to get into the solutions now. It's called the neutral tool. And we're going to go ahead and learn that and see how easy it is to create that pause, that moment in time, so that you can make a really good choice. So what is the neutral tool? I'm going to sell you on it first, and then we're going to do it. The neutral tool is going to help you deflate the reaction. It doesn't make the situation go away. It doesn't mean that what you're going through all of a sudden is, out of your life. But in that moment, and in those moments, it just helps you to deflate your reaction. It's a refocusing tool. It's also, as I mentioned earlier, gives you that perspective. Pull back and see kind of the bigger scene of what's going on. It positions you to be authentic. Often you hear people say, oh, I didn't use a filter, right? The next thing came out of my mouth, and if I could go back, rewind, and do it again, I would say it differently. It also helps you with energy management. So what do we mean when we say neutralize? If you're experiencing any of these emotions, sad, anxious, worried, shocked, we're just gonna get to neutral. Another way of looking at it is going back to the HeartMatt diagram around heart rhythms, is if you're over here in that frustration, any of those stressful emotions, we're gonna get you to neutral. Maybe we can't get you all the way over to appreciation and kindness and gratitude and love, joy and peace and all those renewing emotions. We get you to neutral. And I think this one is so powerful. I want to go back to this. The neutral tool helps stop that physiological stress playing out in our body, which is really going to help with your overall energy management throughout the day. So here we are. To wrap up the session, I'm going to close with the neutral tool. I'm going to first show you the first 2 steps. That's all it is. And then we're going to do it together. The neutral tool is this. In just a moment, I'm going to ask you to focus your attention in the area of your heart, whatever that means for you. All we're simply asking is that everything else, all the noise, leaves your mind, and you're just going to take your attention and focus on the area of your heart. That's it. In step 2, I'm going to cue you up. I'm going to just ask you to imagine that your breath is flowing in and out of your heart. And you're going to breathe just a little slower and a little deeper than usual. That's the HeartMatt tool. I know if my friends at HeartMatt were sitting with me right now, they would be reminding me to say the following. It's not just a breathing technique, although getting your breathing in sync is the #1 emotional regulator. It's a refocusing tool. The neutral tool is a refocusing tool. And I know these days I could do with a lot of refocusing because there's a lot of noise out there. And so what we're going to do now, we're going to do this together. So everyone, I just encourage you right now in this moment, and feel free to close your eyes if you'd like to, is to take your attention and focus all of it to the area of your heart. As best you can, just drown out the noise. Focus your attention to the area of your heart. Now imagine your breath going in and out of that area of your heart. Breathing a little slower and a little deeper than usual. Okay, it's as easy as that. The neutral tool on the surface may seem almost overly easy. In other words, how much of an impact can it really have? Let's close with this. The benefits. You have accessibility to your breath at any time, on demand, on the go. This is a tool that if you put intentionality behind practicing it and making it part of your stress relief toolkit, if you will, that you will find yourself using throughout the entire day. On demand, on the go. You don't have to close your eyes, but maybe at first when you're practicing, that might feel a little bit more comfortable. I use it walking down the hallway, heading into a meeting. I use it in conversations with people on the phone or in person. It can be really subtle and it's really powerful. The other thing I love about this tool is that all ages can learn it. If you personally find this to be a great experience for you and helping you to refocus and deflate from the reaction, you'll find that your kids will probably find the same in terms of the experience. I know parents who've taught this to children as a way of just de-escalating, deflating from some of those higher, more explosive emotions. And it helps them focus better and it helps them express authentically what they really want to say. I think that's so important. And so one more time, why the neutral tool? Why is Christy so excited about this particular tool? Let's go, guys. It deflates the reaction. It helps us to refocus. It gives us that perspective in that moment. It helps you to be authentic and it helps you with your energy, right? It's going to stop the stress from playing out in your body. And so the key thing to like any new behavior, any new thing we want to begin to make part of our MO, got to practice. And so I encourage you, if this is something that's hooked you right now, to just with intentionality, insert the neutral tool throughout the day. And you'll see it becomes a natural part of your way of resetting, reframing, and helping you de-escalate and disengage a little bit from that emotional reaction. With that, I do want to share with you that I love conversations around well-being. I love conversations around emotional intelligence, stress, resiliency. So please reach out to me. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you. I mentioned at the beginning that this is the first of 3 parts. And so the next session, we're going to focus on resetting. I kind of planted a few seeds today using the words reframing and looking at the scene a little bit differently. We're going to get a lot more into that in our next module, when, especially the time that we're in now, how can I see this differently to give ourselves hope and to give us confidence in the future as we get through this season and we look at a thriving, healthy community and lifestyle ahead. It's just around the corner. I'm going to talk about boundaries too, because to reset the scene and to be able to reframe, it's going to require us putting some very intentional boundaries in place. And so with that, guys, I'm going to sign off. It was such a pleasure to spend time with you today. Please reach out to me. I would love to hear from you. And I thank you for your time. And I thank the Gulf Coast Community Foundation for doing this series with me. Take care.